Yes, Guyana to the world.
Globespan is a Guyanese dialogue moving towards the realization of one nation in one Guyana. It's a platform that offers an all-inclusive discussion with the pros, the cons, the ones that is taken aside, and the ones that stand in the middle. Globespan believes agreeing and disagreeing are part of the nation's building.
She is a beauty, beautiful Guyana, with wonderful people all over this country.
Globespan believes every Guyanese voice is part of the nation's building. As we span the globe for voices from the diaspora and those living home, we stand on our commitment that we are all Guyanese working towards one nation in one Guyana. As the world turns on its axis bringing changes, we as Guyanese must adapt to those changes for a better Guyana for all. Globespan stands on its axis with its belief that one nation, one Guyana, one destiny must include voices from all corners of Guyana.
With many flavor, 6 different people blended together. Raise your flag high in unity, we're family with one destiny. Raise your flag high in unity.
Good evening to all our listeners in Guyana, the Caribbean, New York, and around the world. A special good night to all of you. Tonight we have a special night. It's billed as one of our biggest television programs. But before we get to our guest, I want to first say that Noir Singh. This program is made available by Noir Singh. Thanks to Noir Singh for this program, and to Devin Bissoon and Ryan Kissoon as well. Now, the views expressed tonight on this program do not reflect those of the staff and management of Globespan Television. And we are a fair and balanced network. We invite all members of every political party, every political stripe to come on our program. Every organization, trade unions, nonprofit, and everyone is welcome to come on our program at any time. So we have 4 guests tonight, but before I get there, I just want to go to this commercial right away. Most of you in Queens and beyond must have heard about this place, all from one supplier. It's located on 101 Avenue. That's where you can get all your West Indian food and groceries. Now, all from one supplier is a special store. You can order all your curries, your roti, your fish, meat, pastries online, and it will deliver directly to your home. You can use your EBT or credit card or debit card and order online as well. All will be sent directly to your home, or you can pick it up. All from one supplier. You can go to the website, allfromonesupplier.com. I repeat that, all from one is a number, supplier.com. The number is 718-551-3292. 718-551-3292, all from onesupplier.com. Thank you. Good night to all our guests. Tonight we have Mr. Colin Haynes. We have Ms. Kami Narain Ramjit. We have Ms. Shabaki Fernandez, and we have Mr. Leland Rupnarayan, who has not joined us as yet. So before we get started, I want to just let you all know that it's a pleasure to have you in our program. And I hope that you all will come back at a future time based on how we did tonight. Now, for Ms. Fernandez, we don't know anything about you. Colin is a known person because he's on this program many times, and so is Leland. So can you give us a background about yourself?
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Shabaki Fernandez. I'm the co-founder and actually an international consultant of Guyana Global Consulting Group. In addition to that, I work with various charities that we do work throughout Guyana, Africa, and the Caribbean. Previously within Guyana, I served as the executive director of the African Business Roundtable and also the CEO of the Green Guyana Expo and International Small Business Summit. So that's just a bit about me.
And I will ask you to do the same, Ms. Narain. I know you're a lawyer, a Guyanese-American based lawyer, NYCT judge and so on. Give us a background of yourself, please.
Well, as I tell Leland, born in New Amsterdam Hospital. I've been here. I'm a U.S.-based attorney. I'm also a trial court litigator for New York City, New Jersey federal courts, and recently the U.S. Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. I also a mediator, arbitrator. I hold a lot of titles, a mother, a wife. So in that respect, born and bred Guyanese to the bone in the sense. So that's a synopsis of me.
Thank you very much. Now, Colin, you've been known, but let me first begin this question by asking you, Colin. No, let me ask Ms. Fernandez first. Ms. Fernandez, you're living in Guyana, am I right? Ms. Fernandez?
Yes, I'm based between Guyana and I do a lot of traveling, yes.
Okay. Now, can you tell our listeners, is progress being made in Guyana? And in what areas? And do they reflect President Ali's One Guyana initiative?
Well, within Guyana, what I would say, there is progress in terms of services that Guyana does need, like infrastructure and so forth. However, when it comes to the One Guyana, I think we need to be more equitable across the board. When it comes to education, the schools and the opportunities for things that are happening, it shouldn't be just in one area or one community, but it should be across the board in general.
Okay. Now, Colin, you have traveled to Guyana many times and recently too. Can you tell us what you think about the progress being made in Guyana, if there's any progress being made in your view? And in what areas are these progress mostly seen in?
Well, that's a loaded question, Dr. Rose. So progress is happening because development is not static anywhere in the world. So development is happening across the globe because we're more interconnected, because now there's, advances in social media technology and so forth. But still, it remains that in the midst of that, we're still grappling as a nation with 800,000 people, with dilapidated infrastructure, with lack of advancements in science and technology, with an education system that is close to, I want to say apartheid, because there is some are benefiting and some are not. The kids in the hinterland are doing terribly, and we're neglecting them. And then those that are doing out in the coast, we're still caught in this sort of colonialistic mindset that, the more subjects you write, the greater and more successful you'll be, which is a sham. We are seeing there is almost the 48% of poverty. There's 10% of childhood wasting, which is extreme poverty, 20% among adults, boasting a GDP of 25,000 US a person, which is not the reality. It's more like 5,000 or 6,000 if you go on the ground, because there's a lot of poor people, a lot of people who are not eating meals on a daily basis. So when you look around you, you see that there are great street lights, you see there are improved roads. Some of them are poorly done. You see more hospitals are being built, you see more schools are being built, but money is not trickling down to the average person. And that's where I think progress really matters. If we're talking about progress, in my estimation, progress deals with human development. It deals with the ability for a nation, like I said, with less than 1 million people, with a great amount of money, to be able to feed, clothe, house, shelter, and provide for people to strive. I think Guyanese don't need to survive anymore. That was pre-oil. That was pre-2000s. I think as a nation, progress now is measured. Can we afford to go on a vacation with our family once a year? Can we ensure we're getting clean water, not water looks like we're drinking, tea or something like that. And these are real things that are happening, and so that's why I think progress is. So we are getting some progress because progress happens naturally. But I think on an administrative and a government level, we're terribly disappointing our people.
Okay. Very well said. Ms. Ramjit, I want to ask you this question, and it's a good question for you. Crime. We have crime of all sorts in Guyana, ranging from murder, then you have the petty crimes, you have children abuse, child abuse, you have domestic violence and everything else. And it's normal to a lot of people in Guyana, but crime should not be normal to anyone. What do you think, or how do you think we can solve the problem? We know we can't get rid of crime altogether, but how do you think we can reduce crime in Guyana based on your experience in the States here?
So one of the big factor of, let me speak of on one particular crime, domestic violence, which is prevalent in Guyana, and it trickles down into New York, especially New York City, Queens. When I started years ago, you would never see Guyanese or Caribbean people in the criminal court system on what they call the DV part, domestic violence part. And now they're the majority people, and also people of South Asian descent. And what has happened is that in the United States, specifically New York, we have a system in place where there is a criminal aspect to it as well as a civil aspect to it. And recently, I believe this year, maybe 2 months ago, I believe the Parliament actually proposed a bill, a family violence act, a proposal which carries much and similar to the penalties that are enforced in the United States, where not only is there a civil aspect to filing a lawsuit against perpetrators of crime, it also expanded it where it's not only just an intimate relationship, it actually is to family members as well, who are recognized or not recognized in the sense of on paper. So the expansion of that policy, which I'm not sure if it's passed Parliament yet, but is in the pipeline to be passed. I think that is a great legislation in terms of reformation. It took away also a lot of the discretionary from the police. You're required to file a written report. You're required to arrest the perpetrator. And again, implementation is the problem. It's not so much that if the policies pass, it's just that the police must want to do it. They must do these things. And half of the policies that fail is partly of the enforcement aspect of it. And I'm hoping that this legislation pass, because it is something where most of the time there is a flight risk, and in par with the New York laws, which a lot of the diaspora Caribbean people, they see that. They're like, why doesn't Guyana have that? Why is it that they have to settle out of court? Why is it the police hands are tied? And this new legislation is part of that part in terms of the domestic violence, which also will stem in mental health and in terms of resources, which again is very similar to what New York has. Victims' right, elder abuse, all of these encompassing in terms of legislation that is passed. So I think that is one of the things that the current administration, and I believe prior administration, had put in the legwork for it, and it's before Parliament right now to pass.
You mentioned something that is just clipped my imagination, my mind there. You said it's happening, it's rampant in the Richmond Hill area. Before it was never, because when you start practicing, you're seeing very few West Indians or Guyanese in court for these things. But as the area get more populated, do you think these people leave Guyana with the same type of mentality that they can mistreat their spouses and get away with it?
Yes. It is. It doesn't matter how much policies or a piece of paper we are given or give to the clientels or the victims. They have to want to use the resources. And I think there has been a pessimistic approach or a family approach where it's like, it's a shame. We don't want people to know our business. But at the same time, if these are not reported, you're not going to get statistics. You're not going to get, resources available to certain communities, because there is a lack of accountability in terms of reporting, accurate reporting. And one of the things is that it's equivalent to the United States Women's, Victims Violence Act, which again, the title is women, but most of the time, as I've spoken, is that the demographic and the reporting is saying it's mostly female oriented and the victims are female. But if you do the demographic, you will see that most of the perpetrators are male. But again, we're not including the LGBT community. We're not including where the victims are male children, because at that point, then the demographic is skewed. So yes, there is more of a reporting here in the United States, especially in New York. The police officers do not have discretion. If they see and they report domestic violence, you have your day in court. And in Guyana, it is more, in the past, it is the discretion of the officer if you can mediate. They act as a mediator to try to dissipate the situation, which is now in parallel to what the New York laws have. You have no choice. If there's domestic violence, you are excluded from the home. You will get a domestic appearance ticket to show up. There's order of protection. And what has changed also is that the victim does not have to seek shelter elsewhere. They can remain in the home. Guyana never had that before. It's basically go to your mother's, go to your grandmother's, go to a family member for safety and shelter. Now the new legislation, which again, it's phenomenal. If is the whole overhaul of that law is going to be equivalent or parallel, where it is now taking into account, the courts now will make the decision as opposed to taking it from the enforcement part of it. And again, somebody knows the police officers and so forth. And I think we're talking about equity and parity. This is something where it's going to be across the board, and it's not who knows what.
Thanks for that information. Ms. Fernandez, briefly, domestic violence we know is prevalent in Guyana, but why is it so prevalent in your view? You're on mute.
I believe it's prevalent because, one, with how society has conditioned persons. And when it comes to a lot of people, they believe that it's preserving family values by not reporting what is going on. And also the stigma of shame and the stigma of divorce. Because many people, and from especially generations before, they try to say to persons that it's easy and it's better to hold on to the family, think about the children, think about everyone else except yourself. So when it comes down, it's about preservation of family. It's about focusing on not bringing shame to your family or disgrace. So many people endure. The other thing is a lot of persons do not have the economic means to leave. So if they're dependent upon their abuser or the family of their abuser to assist them, they have to stay. Then the other thing is they have to think also, sometimes they may say, okay, I want to leave. Or they have persons encourage them, but are there any services to really help them to be able to leave and to be able to know that, okay, I can give myself 3 to 6 months and I can be on my own. Another fact is that of education, because a lot of persons in those situations don't have the means to necessarily go and, let's say, look for a job or set themselves up in a business or any economics that can assist themselves and their children or their family in general.
Leland, are you there?
I am here.
Okay. Now, Leland, you have left Guyana more than 3 decades ago. Welcome to the program, by the way. And you have returned a few times. Now, tell us how you see Guyana through the eyes from the diaspora.
Well, the diaspora offers a wealth of skills, finance. They have the work ethic, the mindset, the right aptitude towards work in Guyana. However, people from the diaspora will never return to that country because the whole format of governance in that country is very poor. It's third world up to now. In 2024, it has not changed much. What Guyana needs, first of all, is a constitution change. We need what you call a public service restructuring, not only in terms of work ethic, but we need a motivational situation where people who serve the public must understand that they are public servants. They are paid by the public. The public service is a horrible entity, right? The customer service is very poor. The dress code is horrible. The speech of these people in interaction with the public is horrible. Guyana needs a whole new change in all aspects of that country, starting with the constitution, accountability, and worst of all, Guyana needs a new healthcare system because we have seen 1.4 billion US dollars withdrawn from the Natural Resources Fund by the first half of this year. We haven't seen any improvement in the lives of people.
Talking about the healthcare system, Colin, you're a public health specialist. What can you say about the healthcare system in Guyana?
Well, it's without doubt it's an abysmal failure. You're second in the world for suicides, which doesn't include other mental health issues. So one of the things I tell people is suicide becomes the end all to something, but people don't just commit suicide or successfully attempt suicide, right? It's a buildup of anxiety, depression, hopelessness, grievance, trauma, right? Now, there is no way in our wildest dream we could think that a country that is the fastest developing country in the world or developing economy in the world will not have these problems. Because as the economies develop, and it's something I think we have to, I want to implore to Guyanese people, the pressures become more and more invasive and more tough. Cost of living is rising, right? Food availability, housing availability, education expenses, and so forth. These things now all become encumbering on you. You know, I grew up in Linden, and we had a very small house. We all ate. We were fine and so forth. And over the years, where Guyana's developed, I've moved out from Linden. I live in the East Bank now, and things are different. But along with that comes more challenges, right? Along with building a house in Guyana, along with visiting often and family and friends, and the changes in businesses, things changes. So where we're lacking is essentially we're lacking in institutionalization, and this is across the country. When I talk about institutionalization, I'm not talking about Georgetown Public Hospital as a place, right? The hospital is just a place. I mean, you could take a foul pen too, and you can make it an institution if you're doing the right things, right? But an institution does well when there is training and education, when your doctors are adequately trained, right? When they have cutting-edge technology, when they know and they can experience different things and they know what to do. In addition to that, research, right? You just can't know what's happening in a community by just looking at people on a daily basis and coming up with prophylaxis and ideas. You have to do the research. The research asks how, why, and what. What can we do about it? And that is lacking. You have all these doctors and so forth, but we're not seeing a lot of research coming out of that institution as to why is quarantine the suicide capital? Why is Suddy the suicide capital, right? Why is children in Guyana, I think at the age of 12 or something, I've seen the stats, most of them are wearing glasses. Why is childhood obesity on rise in Guyana? Why obesity across Guyana now is on the rise? I think there's a statistic I look at, somewhere upward 30-something% of the country has obesity, right? Is that impact now in the change in our lifestyles and change our foods? So this is vital for an institution. Now, the institution also has to be able to check on itself. You hear terrible stories oftentimes about Georgetown Public Hospital. It's because there is also lack of accountability and quality measures. One of the things before coming on the show, a friend of mine told me to talk about is a complaint process. From time to time, we saw on the ED, a patient just died, and the mother was pleading to the doctor to help her daughter, and her daughter was passing out. She had seizures, and she had seizures to the point of she just passed out right there in the ED and died. I mean, how uncaring can we be as health practitioners that we see people dying all the time and we just sit there and do nothing, what is wrong with a country that does that? That means that there's a lack of a complaint process. There's a lack of an understanding when patients are going down. You have to, drive to getting them the emergent care, right away. Coupled with that, I think there is a great deal for civic responsibility and compassion. I think
Oh,
looking at
we'll come to that. We'll come to that. We'll come to that later on. Now, Ms. Fernandez, can you tell us about the people, how the people are making out in Guyana, how they view things, the changes, how they see the changes, and so forth? Can you tell us what the reaction of the people in Guyana on all what's taking place?
Many persons in Guyana, the changes that they see, the changes don't trickle down to economic development, to finances in their pockets. A lot of people with the cost of living rising, like celery, basic greens that we can go and pay $200 for or so forth, they're now above $1,000. So for the average person, the salary, if they have to look at rent and so forth, the money's not making it. And then when it comes to their children, you don't only have to feed and clothe them, you have to buy books, look after transportation and everything. So many persons are complaining. And once again, there's no safety net within Guyana to say you have a welfare system or so forth to add to make ends meet. It's remittances or to see how best they can help each other, but it's in a very bad state. And poverty is on the rise even greater than before.
Leland, you have been to Guyana. Have you seen that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just to make this point here, the cost of living has been so far apart from the actual wages and factoring inflation that had it not been for the people in the diaspora, and this is what this topic is all about, right? Today's topic is about the diaspora contribution. Had it not been for remittances from the diaspora, not only monetary, but the usual barrels that go regular to Guyana, Guyanese would be in a serious problem. Luckily, Guyana doesn't have an inbound location where there are no riverian borders. So at the height of the food shortages, Guyanese were forced to go, as we say, backtrack to Suriname and Venezuela, and of course Brazil, to import, but the necessary goods to survive, not to have a good life, just to basically survive. People used to smuggle soap, oil, split peas, flour, and you name it. That's because Guyana didn't have a program to develop. You don't ban flour and the next day say we will plant breadfruit trees. People have to plant certain things, and that goes into today's government too. And if you look at the housing situation in that country, it's a 5-year wait for a house lot with a country that has 83,000 square miles and 750,000 people for the past 50 years. Nothing has changed. We got the same amount of square miles, we have the same amount of people. And you wait 5 years for a house lot, but the Chinese could come and get 10,000 acres with the sanctions and the blessings of the VP, and it's all well and good. Guyana doesn't seem to belong to Guyanese anymore. Guyana seems to belong to Exxon and the Chinese. Because when you look at Bangladesh with 173 million people and 58,000 square miles, how do you form an equation between Guyana's land distribution and that? It's a horrible situation in the housing department. And that's one ministry that needs restructuring. But we could go on and on. I'll tell you this. The main issue facing the entire Guyana is one of accountability, right? Cleanliness, clarity in awarding of contracts and expenditure, and above all, auditing of our finances. The Public Accounts Committee is presently auditing in 2024-2020 expenses. Where we go with this, when people have gotten away with your money, you can't find them after 4 years. And every single year, the Auditor General has pinpointed every single ministry has defaulted and have been involved in corruption, yet nothing is being done about it. That's a sad thing about Guyana. There is no accountability and there is no legal structure to bring these people to justice. Have we ever heard of any high-ranking public official getting jailed? Oh, granted, they have been charged, but what happens? It all fizzles out like a damn squib. Nothing happens, and you know who suffer? The people of Guyana who suffer. And I've made this point many times. Guyana has reached a state where we're the land of many waters. It's important water to drink. It shows a lack of vision and a lack of planning in getting simple things done. If this government could focus on one issue, the reduction of energy costs, Guyana will tremendously benefit. Energy cost is tremendously high, and every single thing in Guyana that you buy and utilize is based on energy costs. Transportation to work, manufacturing goods, the use of a vehicle, all are based on energy costs. And presently, Guyana has a 50% consumption tax on imported fuels. If the government really wants to help people, we can eliminate that. We don't need the taxes from fuel. Guyana has enough money. Guyana has enough money from its oil, from pumping oil. We pump $18 million oil every hour. 18 million US dollars oil every hour. And as Ms. Fernandez says, we don't see it trickling down.
Okay. I'll come back to oil just now. Ms. Fernandez, Leland talks, not Ms. Fernandez, sorry. Ms. Ramjit, Leland talks about accountability. But Guyana has a legal system that should hold people accountable for any sort of crimes they commit or whatever violence they commit against each other. Now, but there's a problem. There are people on remand for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. And the Bar Association is saying this is because there are not enough judges and magistrates in the country. Are you practicing law in Guyana, Miss Narette?
No, I'm not.
You're
No.
not. Okay.
I'm not.
Have you looked at the system, the legal system in Guyana?
I have. I actually have a lot of colleagues in Guyana who practices there, and we co-counsel in the U.S. and in Guyana. Your question regarding the remand in terms of due process and efficiency. One of the things that Mr. Haynes spoke about is a civic duty. And most attorneys, the system that they have in place right now of the aged out for magistrate needs to be expanded so that the salary discrepancy that attorneys want to be a magistrate and the requirement for magistrate at this point is archaic. At age 55 is when most of these magistrate retires, unless there's an expansion of the age out period. Most attorneys at that point, you need a 10-year or 20-year requirement to practice law. So by the time a 27 or 30-year-old get out to practice and have their own office, you're not going to get someone to come out and take a salary cut of close to 80%. So the idea is that the bar needs to have some kind of implementation and push for it in the sense that let them focus on getting that age restriction lifted so that the magistrates they're inundated. They don't have enough. Infrastructures are not there. Every single village in Guyana has a police station. Why isn't the magistrate allowed to have the courts? They're there. The prisoners are there. They can bring them there. The resources are there. Why do they not have the magistrate go to those police stations and have hearings? That is one of the solution. You don't have to worry about the infrastructure where you have to build new courthouses and so forth. And to combine based on demographic, the resources. So combine where there's less of a population where there's a larger population to maintain a more efficient system and to deal with the lack of magistrate and applicants that they are. So, I mean, one of the good things is that hopefully a law school is forthcoming in Guyana, and they will have people in place, and they will be, applicants who are in their last years in law school where they can assist and in the interim get the ex-judges and the retired judges who have aged out to come in on an interim basis as a referee or a temporary interim to alleviate some of that backlog. But you cannot have where there's one magistrate and a support staff to deal with that calendar system. It is unfair to that magistrate and that staff, and it's unfair to the people who want to see their family members out swiftly and quickly. The issue is that due process means efficiency and also means your right to be protected. But at what point? Are you dying in jail by the time you can even get out? And the services that are implemented, I mean, I cannot equate that to the United States because we have a very strong constitutional mandate in terms of right of due process here and notice provision, and there are time frame. And again, I don't speak on Guyana laws in terms of their policy. I mean, each country has their right to implement laws. I mean, we speak of gun shootings here every other day in terms of right to bear arms. Guyana doesn't have that policy. You know, they don't have shootouts every day. But again, the equivalent is that there are some archaic system that needs to be changed, and I'm hoping that will assist. But the problem is that you have a manpower issue or woman power issue. You do not have enough candidates. And again, it goes to your civic duty. You know, let the old judges come back. Let the referees come in. Make exception for foreign-born attorneys who do not have to practice law, but in that way assist the current magistrates and the current judges there without having to pass the bar. You know, if you've submitted enough time and showing that you have the credentials to do that.
Thanks. Folks, I'm getting a lot of messages from our listeners. So far, I've got 31 questions to ask you all. But I want the folks out there to know that I cannot ask all these questions. So please bear with me on this one. I will ask a few, but not all of them. And someone asked me to ask Leland this question, but I'll come to that just now. Let me just make this announcement. All from one supplier. It's a place in Richmond Hill. I think it's on 101 Avenue, where you can get all your curries, your roti, your fish, your meat, your pastries, delivered directly to your home. Just go online, allfromonesupplier.com, or call 718-551-3292. Allfromonesupplier.com. You can use your EBT card, your debit or credit card, or any other valid cards you want to use. You can place the order online and it will be delivered directly to your home if you make such request. Now, Leland, I have a question from one of our listeners to you. This person said that you normally write letters on traffic accidents and traffic deaths in Guyana. The person wants to know what can be done to reduce traffic accidents on our roadways. Leland.
Yeah, well, that's a multifold question and it's a multifold answer.
Be brief as possible.
A result of human error more than any other factor. Human error has to do with three aspects. One, the way you obtain your license. Secondly, the way you drive in terms of trying to reach where you want to go in such a short time. And thirdly, alcohol consumption. Those three factors are the main causes of road accidents. Alcohol is number one. It seems as though the Guyana police force is poorly equipped to deal with drunk driving because in a very recent high-profile case, one former GDF officer, high-ranking officer, was drunk when he killed someone. But guess what? The policeman who took his breathalyzer did not calibrate the breathalyzer machine. Who took his alcohol breath sample? How stupid can you get? A human life has been lost because of the incompetence of the police force, and that doesn't only translate into traffic work by the police. It translates into many other aspects of poor policing. Domestic violence is an issue that Ms. Narayan spoke about, and Colin has also mentioned it. We have the second highest suicide rate in the world. But coming back to the traffic, many people have bought their licenses. They haven't gone through the regular process of obtaining a license. I have known people personally who said, I don't have time to go and sit in a class and listen to some stupid policeman lecture to me how to drive. I know to drive. I used to drive my father's car. So guess what? They get a license. To take this argument a step higher, and I have told this directly to two former ministers of Home Affairs, right? My good friend Cameron Johnson said, yes, that's very good. And I even told this to the vice president, you need different categories of licenses when you're on the road. For instance, if you're driving a commercial vehicle that carries passengers, you need to know CPR and first aid. If you're driving a vehicle that carries fuel, combustible materials, you need to know hazmat, hazardous materials courses. If you're driving a vehicle that carries sand and lumber and other heavy materials, you need to know about centrifugal force, hydroplaning, wheel to road traction, and those things will prevent accidents. Every single day there's an accident stupidly happening on the road. People do not realize that these are highly qualified, there should be highly qualified people to enforce these licensing procedures. There is no recertification of licenses. And in Guyana, as soon as you get a driver's license, you're allowed to drive a minibus. That means you have 10 to 20 people lives in your hand regularly, not only one time because the bus will make many trips during the day. You can't just drive a commercial vehicle with a simple driver's license. You need to have a commercial driver's license. You should only get it after 5 years of driving experience. So the whole licensing process is highly flawed. Very, very highly flawed. And it doesn't seem that this current minister, Mr. Ben, is able to straighten anything out. Mr. Ben has to straighten up himself first because he doesn't seem to do anything.
Okay. I have a question here for you, Ms. Fernandez, but also you, Ms. Ramjit, you can weigh in on it after. Ms. Fernandez, I have a question here. This person asked me to ask you, since you're living in Guyana, are women being recognized and treated fairly for their education and experience like men in Guyana?
I would say no, especially based on the spaces where women are placed. Many times you can be at a business meeting, a round table or so forth, and women would make contributions that are valuable, but a man can say the same thing and it seems as more valuable. And what I also feel is that many times we need to have allies that are men that can stand up right there at that table and say what this woman said, because basically it's the same thing. He just said it over. And be allies and assist women in having this, because being represented. And the other thing is that sometimes you're in spaces where you have there are many women, but there's one woman, she may have that recognition or what's not. But when it comes to the other, she may need to assist, because women, we will have to carry each other. We have to, because when we have no one in rooms to speak for us, we need to do so. And we need to remember that when a certain things, like for me, if I don't like something, I would speak up. But many women don't have that kind of courage. And what happens soon as someone speaks, a male speaks or so forth, it's like to dumb them down. I've been at meetings whereby I'm the lead. I remember an experience I had years ago. And they were carrying on the conversations, not realizing that I was the person who they needed to be speaking to, until a man there turned and said, Shabaki's the person who is doing everything and who you need to talk to.
Ms. Ramjit?
I agree. I agree with Ms. Fernandez. We do need to pull each other up and advocate for each other. The lack of confidence, I mean, I've been in practice close to 30 years. I own my own law firm. And the level that I see of young entrepreneurs or even attorneys, that when they are in a room, there is something about it that makes them feel that they must be mousy or muted, in the sense that because they're going up against a man or that they are in the room. And we do need allies. We do need to advocate positions. And if a female or a person who identifies as a female does in fact have a position, and the position is valid, it should be advocated. But there is a discrepancy. There is a disparity in the fact that most boards, most organizations do not have women. And the ones who do advance is to the point where they feel that they are the helm, and they don't pull up other women. And that's one of the things I feel, that as much as we want the male allies to put us in the same room. Women themselves do not do it. There is such a cattiness to it, and it will take the change in the mindset. We talk about a lot of the policy changes, but a lot of it has to do with the Guyanese mindset in terms of wanting change, speak on the change, but also advocate for the change. You cannot just go on TikTok and social media and gripe about it. What are you doing about it? Stop being. One of the things is that there are true victims. There are true victims. And I'm not saying in your mind there are not victims, and everyone has a right to voice their hurt and their feelings. And if you feel victimized, do something about it. But it takes a lot of courage. It doesn't matter what a piece of paper says or what we give to someone. Policies are implemented. Unless you actually turn that door and decide to walk out, or you say, you know what, there is 2 candidates there, and let me give that woman a chance. And a lot of it is because in the household also, we talk about shame. Men do not, including if it's a husband and wife or a father, the daughter doesn't get what the son gets. You know, we see that in terms of economics, home economics. It's the female that's cooking, the male is not. And for, you know, the shame of, oh, why is your son doing it? You know, we go into this whole, you know, systematic, it's a system, and it's not something where policy needs to be done. It's the household themselves. That is a unit in itself that needs to change. The mindset needs to change. And I see that happening when they come to the United States. It changes tremendously the advocacy for female in terms, because now it's a 2-income household. But again, the resources are here in the United States that is lacking in Guyana, which needs to expand.
Okay. Now, Colin and Leland, based on what Ms. Fernandez and Ms. Ramjit have said, women are not being treated fairly in almost every aspect of society. This is not only in Guyana, but I think it's throughout the world to some extent. Now, but in the context of Guyana, what should be done to make sure that women are being treated fairly like men? Colin?
Yeah,
I think be brief on this one.
Yeah, I think Ms. Ramjit actually hit the nail on the head when she talked about social responsibility. You know, I talk to people quite a lot in Guyana, and I hear their frustrations, but then I ask them, what are we doing about it? Right? Because it's all good, and I think we're caught in a paradigm now in Guyana where people know what's going on, want to do something, but they're scared. And just like every time, whether we're looking at the civil rights in the 1960s, we're looking at the apartheid up until the 90s, they can't be changed without a repercussion. I think we as Guyanese, we believe that, yes, getting on social media and so forth, and, you know, we're all stoked about we can put something out there. But I believe that more has to be done in terms of people have to wake up and hold government accountable and get out there and protest and advocate for what they would like to see. Now, yes, across the world, there is a problem with inequities among women. And I think that policy also needs to be to govern, because in Guyana, it's still a male-dominated society. You look at all the way through government, you know, representation in parliament, you know, down to the courts and everything. Also, I would like to say that the education system has to promote that. I think more women has to understand as well that the success or the key to you thriving in this new environment is also to have those skills. Because, you know, one of the things with job creation and pay, I think one of the things there is not that women are, not always that women are underpaid because there's a system that prevents them from underpaid. I think women sometimes are underpaid because negotiation skills. I think sometimes they accept stuff without pushing the buck a little further. And I think sometimes that also lends to those inequities. Now, I'm not saying it happens all the time, But I'm saying that we need to get our young women, we need to get our young ladies trained that you need to negotiate. You need to push a little harder for what you need.
Okay. Now, just to say this, in Guyana, I think it's mandated that Parliament must have one third of its members must be female. So I think it has to be somewhere with 21, 22, 23 members must be female in Parliament. So that's something that's been mandated. But I don't know if it's being carried out. I haven't really checked on it.
Do we have 23 women in the National Assembly?
Yeah, you're supposed to have that one third, I think, is the mandated amount. I stand corrected, but I think that's the mandated amount. So they should have at least 23 MPs. But I think you have 23 MPs in Parliament because APNU got about maybe 8. PP got about maybe 12 to 15. And there's one opposition there, this girl, Dr. Kisoon. So I think you should have, I think they have 23. I'm not sure. Now, Leland, this male chauvinist society is based on social upbringing. Can you briefly explain how we can get rid of this? Be very, very brief.
Dr. Rose, the very point you just made about the Constitution requiring one third of the parliamentary representatives to be female is alone an unconstitutional move. Half of Guyana are female. Why can't half of Parliament be female? Let's start with that.
That's the law. They have it there. So I can't say anything to that. That's the law. Maybe
So
some it'll be half female, half male. I don't know.
Dr. Rose, there are 21 members of Parliament that are women.
Okay. Well, it's close to the 23.
Colin, it could be 21 and a half.
No, but Leland, can you tell us why this social upbringing making a chauvinistic society in most countries, and it's happening in the States to some extent and across Europe? But why is it? But in the Caribbean, it's prevalent. Why is it?
Well, after all, the chauvinistic male is dominant in Eastern cultures, not in Western cultures to that extent. If you look at the Middle East and India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, women have zero rights. Actually, zero rights.
Indonesia and all those countries too, I know.
Yeah, all these heavily Muslim republics, women don't have any right. A woman can be divorced by simply saying, I divorce you from the husband, and that's it. But women have a lot of responsibility in bringing up a family, and it was Gandhi who said, if I have a choice of educating my son or my daughter, I'll educate my daughter. Because women have to be a judge to know who to punish and how to punish. They have to be an economist to know what to buy and what not to buy, because there's only a fixed amount of money that's coming in from the husband, assuming it's a one-income household. And a woman has to be a psychologist to understand which child is lying and which child needs what in terms of social help and any form of emotional help. So it's a tough job being a housewife. And understand this, the cost of living in Guyana is horrendous. And it puts a lot of pressure on men because men don't want to, nobody wants to fail, but men feel inadequate that they cannot provide for their family. That's why this leads to a lot of infidelity. But that's a different topic, and I'm not Colin is more of an expert on that, and Miss Finance. But I'll tell you something about the cost of living. My father worked for $200 a month in 1970. I just started going to Saints in 1970. $200 a month was an ounce of gold. Fast forward to 2024, where today the price of gold is $2,600 an ounce. It means that you have to be working $500,000 a month to get an ounce of gold. That's where the cost of living has run away from the actual real wages. Real wages in this world is measured in terms of the gold standard, more than any other factor. And when you look at that, we are no better off now than we were in terms of earning capacity and spending capacity. So when we talk about the cost of living simply means that you need to take a basket of money to bring home a basket of goods from the market. So I'll end up this by saying this. Change cannot be effected by legislation or a constitutional mandate. Change must evolve as a social condition for this world to make progress. And you know who said that? Nelson Mandela.
Okay. Now, Leland, at some early point in the conversation, you mentioned that people have to wait 5 years to get a house lot and so forth and so forth. And Guyana has 83,000 square miles, which in effect is not 83 because part of Ankoko is gone. Now, and only about 750, 800,000 people. But under APNU for 5 years, they give out about 7,000 house lots. But the PEP in 4 years give out almost 30,000 house lots. How do you account for that?
Well, the PPP is doing a good job. The PPP will outshine APNU in almost every areas. But when you think APNU was corrupt, and when you think the Bornum regime was corrupt, the PPP can teach these people how to be corrupt. You know, there's a certain finance minister that used to be called the 20% man, and we all know the reasons for that. That is why Guyana, the Natural Resource Fund, which is a comic show, is there just as a piece of paper in Parliament. The Natural Resource Fund is controlled by a majority of parliamentary votes. And we know who have a majority in Parliament. And the PPP that has a one-seat majority in Parliament rules like a dictator for the land. What they don't realize is that Amerindian people also live in that country. African Guyanese also live there, and Indo-Guyanese. This country doesn't belong to Granger and Jagdeo and Irfan Ali. The country belongs to the people of Guyana, and the people of Guyana should benefit from its resources. But it so happens that Guyana is only run by a handful of people. That's why when you see decisions are made, it is not made for the benefit of the general population. It is made for the chosen few. It is made for the disciples of the PPP who can the word is who can suck up to their whims and fancies. And I will say this many, many times. Guyana has gotten to a stage when I have to quote someone who I never really liked, Dr. Chelly J. Guyana, who once called Guyana Booker's Guyana. So should we call Guyana Exxon Guyana now? Even the cricket team is Exxon. Just look at just look at every uniform they wear and you have your answer. Where are we going with this? We have become like tenants in our own country. And a Guyanese working a very good job in the public service cannot afford a rent when Exxon is going to pay 5 times as much rent. And this is called a double dipping strategy in economic terms because Exxon pays $5,000 US for a 3-bedroom apartment, which no Guyanese can afford. And then they file a tax deduction. And our economists are no wiser than giving into it. So Exxon gets a deduction, plus they get a tax holiday on everything in that country. So we in big problem in that country, and no one seems to realize the depth of corruption that we're going through in that country. And we don't understand the amount of money we are losing. We're looking at what we're gaining. But we should also look at what Guyana is losing from pumping oil, which is a God-given resource and everyone should be benefit. So it's really, I mean, Guyana is in my analysis as a member of the diaspora who've been here for 25 years in America, is a backward, corrupt rice republic that has to import water. We have a country that has more rum shop than school. How are you going to make progress? I told Barjak this face to face. You go to Horstelin and Lenora and Better Hope and Bushlot. They got 10 rum shop and 3 schools roughly in those areas. And you mentioned a point. They should never sell alcohol on Sundays in that country. Maybe that should be a new ordinance that should be passed.
But alcohol is being sold there on a Sunday.
You betcha I could go to some rum shop and buy some rum on Sunday, man. But I'll tell you this, alcohol is the cause of a whole lot of problems in that country. Domestic violence is one, but violence man to man, listen, just yesterday, Monday, yes, last night, walking distance from President Ali House in Lenora, 2 persons were stopped to death and a third is in the hospital. 2 o'clock in the morning, they were drinking and then a fight erupted in Lenora. It's public knowledge.
Okay, but you know, in society, everything is there, but you have to be rational in your thoughts. Now, I want to ask Ms. Fernandez this, and also you, Ms. Ramjit. Our education system in Guyana, is it meeting the needs of the people, of the students, of the children, Ms. Fernandez?
I don't think it is adequately meeting the needs. And one thing that I'm looking at is how we place our children within the various grades. And many times we have them in grades that don't meet their needs per se. So with the even with the math, for example, how we're teaching them, Many of the children, they don't understand the basic math, and they're being passed on to the next levels and so forth. So like how we would learn our times tables, do our spelling and so forth. A lot of times, even and this goes to both public and private schools that I've seen what's been happening. It's the way they're teaching the children, some of them. And one thing I must say, in Guyana, I haven't noticed per se that within the school doing any testing to see who's maybe dyslexic, may have ADHD or any of those things. So you have a lot of children who are being taught, but it's not in a way that they would learn and who should not even be within the regular system. There's some of them even from the writing level that they reached a high school, but the basic education, they should not have even been passed through that level. They should have still been in primary school to have the basics. Like in the past, you can have children by the time they reach to Form 1 or so forth that they're capable of managing. But now you have children at common entrance age who, because of the age, they're placed in the class, but they still can't write properly. They can't read properly. And for some strange reason, they write exams and they end up in a high school, and it just perpetuates a cycle of poverty and everything that's negative on that line.
Okay.
So for me, it doesn't meet the needs.
Ms. Ramjit, I want to ask you this question. You know Queen's College, you know Bishops, and I will add Borby's High School, and any other high school you want. These are considered the Ivy League schools in Guyana. But the thing is, they're being funded by public funds. Now, in the United States, we have Ivy League colleges and schools as well. But the colleges, most Ivy League universities are private, Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Princeton, and so forth. Now, do you think this system we have in Guyana, we should actually bring the other schools up on par to match with these schools since they're using public funds? In other words, should we spend more money in the schools that are not producing enough or highly qualified kids like these three institutions I mentioned?
Oh, most definitely, most definitely. You're going across the board in different learning style and different modes of teaching. A child who has any kind of neurodiversity issues, ADHD, autism, anything like that, is going to learn differently. Someone who is nonverbal and who became later on verbal, their needs are different. To rubber stamp it across the board and say, you know what, everyone is on the same page in terms of learning style. And again, it has to do with demographic. It has to do with the household. If you have educated parents, non-educated parents, if you have resources, non-resource, if you have simple thing as electricity to run on the internet, things like these are setbacks that needs to be brought forward. So yes, there is what those public funds go to those specialized schools. You cannot continue to funnel it through those schools. The resources there must be in the formative years, which would be, I would say, age 8 to age 12. Those are the age where diagnostic testing needs to be done to see if you're at a certain level. The teachers do not have the equipment. And again, it has to do with resources. And I'm comparing the United States standard, not to say we have a great educational standard here. One of the things is that the math parity across the global system, because of AI, artificial intelligence, and taking over the math world, Guyana is at the crossroad where they can change that thinking. The different type of math now, and it happens in the United States school system as well. The math is no longer the way we are taught math in the sense of multiplication, addition, whatever, also in calculus, in higher mathematical levels. It has changed. So the system of critical thinking has to be established, but one of the things that needs to be implemented is that critical thinking in terms of analysis and not so much interpretation. And that is lacking in Guyana. And I don't know if that is across in terms of the teachers equivalent in terms of that. From my understanding, you do not have to go to teachers college to be a teacher. You can also have a high school diploma and the equivalent of a high school diploma because of the need for teachers. So to get the teachers out, one of the things also is that the parental involvement or the guardian involvement, they leave it in the days when we went to school. The parents were involved. Your parents sat with you, whether they knew they were educated or not, they sat with you to push you Now it's, oh, put it all on the teacher. Let the teacher get it done. And when they do, the teacher do want to see them, it's on the teacher. I send my child to school and therefore you have to do it in school. The idea of homework is no longer there because now, you know, we can Google it. TikTok can teach us. We rely on bits and pieces of social media to teach our children and also to teach the parent. And that's problematic. Guyana used to be where the brains come out. The countries outside the diaspora used to go there and grab all these students and say, you know what, bring them. And at this point, the educational system, it's not so much that it's not there. It is there. It's just that, again, the social media influence is there. The teachers do not get the support from their family. And in terms of, and there's no resources. There must be resources. You don't wait until a child is 14, 15-year-old to recognize there is deficiency in that child in terms of the capability of learning. There must be mechanism in place. And one of the things is that, again, the stigma of mental health. That child is an own way. That child does not want to learn in terms of, and the punishment that is given out to that child, as opposed to acknowledging that that child has a special needs or is neurodiverse, and let's put things in place, as opposed to my child is just hard A's, they don't want to learn.
The government has been spending a lot of money, and you have to give them credit for that, to have more trained teachers, nurses, and so forth. But the report has shown that as far as these people are being trained and they become qualified, they migrate to the Caribbean countries because of more money and so forth. Now, the report, one of the things I was told while I saw this, St. Lucia is paying a teacher 3 times the salary a teacher gets in Guyana. St. Lucia is noted for what?
Nothing.
Bananas and so forth.
St. Lucia has no resource.
So, well, they have big tourism, so that's a good resource for them. But they're noted for the bananas and so forth. But my question to you, Leland first and then Colin after. Why is it that we, as a country with all the minerals, all our resources, cannot pay teachers more? Be brief though, we coming to the end of the time. Colin.
Well, the reason why we cannot pay teacher more is because we don't want to pay them more. It's as simple as that. If you're gonna train teacher, and this is where the Attorney General office is sadly lacking in constructive thinking. If you want to spend $1 million training a teacher, you should give that teacher a 5-year contract so that they will remain in your country and utilize that training that you give them. Because if you're going to spend money on tertiary education for people, it is an investment of taxpayers' money, and taxpayers should benefit from it. Therefore, teachers should be given a contract and a stipulation that they should serve at least 3 years before they can migrate. So you hold them accountable for that. But what is so strange about that country is that this government has borrowed more money, more than when Barnum left office. Right now, we are in terrible overdraft. And we have not even given a pensioner an increase. A pensioner gets 40,000 Guyana dollars monthly, which is 200 US.
So 36,000.
Huh? How much now?
36,000.
We just round it off for 40,000. We give them some extra money. That's a DSP that I give to somebody in this here. And the comical thing is, Robert Prasad, the foreign secretary, the chairman of the public service, Mr. Samaru, Go Invest head, Mr. Ramsarup or Ramrup, whatever his name is. They came to the Marriott 2 months ago to recruit people from New York. Now, that's an ill-fated venture that was doomed to failure. How can you come to one of the highest paid workforce in the world and try to recruit people to go back to Guyana to be nurses and teachers and bricklayers and welders and so? That's a comical show and a total waste of money. Total waste. Just have to make that point. But let me tell you this. In 2021, we were $4.4 billion in overdraft from the consolidated fund. The government can go overdraft because they have potential future income. 1 year later, at the end of 2022, from $4 billion, it went up to $90 billion. 90 billion Guyana dollars in overdraft. That's just for one aspect of Guyana's fundings. It shows that this government is spending money very recklessly. You cannot spend money on someone without having a legal binding contract on them. You're spending taxpayers' money, and teachers that migrate, they have a right to migrate. It's a freedom of, you're free to choose where you want to work. Unless you are getting a proper remuneration in that country, you can leave. And that's what happens to Guyana right now. All the bright people are out of the country. That's why you have this kind of poor leadership in both the APNU and PNC, whatever you call them, and the AFC. You know, it's a second tier leadership quality that you have. I won't say mediocrity. There are still bright people there, but the Attorney General of Guyana needs to get his act together to formulate a policy where people who are given government money, taxpayers' money, to be trained should be retained.
But I think that policy is in place. I think it's for 5 years too. But after the 5 years, they're gone. So it doesn't matter. Anyway, Colin, what's your take on that? Why is it that we cannot pay teachers more than those smaller islands?
We can. We have the money. With $15 million a day in oil money, I've given the most viable and the only solution there is, because I'm here anybody giving a solution. So I think a solution is better than no solution. So my idea is take 10 days or 12 days, almost $200 million, and that equates to about $40 billion. And when I extrapolate that across the public service, because I'm not only saying that teachers need to get a raise, I think all members of the public service and nurses need a raise, people who are working, doctors need a raise, policemen need a raise, firefighters need a raise, everybody need a raise. That amounts to about $80,000 extra a month. So imagine if you were a trained teacher getting paid $90,000, and that's what a trained teacher gets now, who's in training college, you get $170,000. I believe you can raise the income tax threshold to $100,000, and so you put more money in the pockets. Now you can spend another maybe $100 million and provide things like duty-free concessions, like housing or housing allowances and other things. And I think that the teacher's portfolio could additionally add anywhere between $100,000 to $150,000 additional to what they're making. So you make the profession attractive. We talked about crime earlier. One of the reasons why there's crime is because the police officers are criminals too. Let's make no mistake about it, right? You read the news, we see what's going on.
Well, some police officers.
Well, yes, some of it. I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them are. It's endemic in the force, right? And that's why we can't solve crime, because the same people we are calling to solve the problem, they're the people who got us there in the first place. So what I believe we need to do is pay them more, pay our teachers more. We can do it. Nobody can say we can't do it. And then one of the things I want to say, folks always tell me about inflation. We have hyperinflation now. We have uncontrollable price index in Guyana. So I believe we need to be able to pay the people so that they can meet that level, because now you have to live at $25,000 a lifestyle with a $5,000 paycheck a year, and it's just not cutting it.
Okay.
Colin, you made a point that Guyana gets $15 million a day from oil pumping. Guyana gets, let me put it this way, $18 million an hour Exxon pumps out of the ground. An hour, $18 million an
I
hour.
didn't make that point. I think it's Colin or someone else, but not me.
No, he made the point. Leland made the point.
Point, Leland.
$18 an hour. You just do the calculation.
I'm saying Guyana's share is 50 million a day.
Yeah. You got that. You got that
Okay.
right.
Okay, now the AFC with Nigel Hughes have just issued a report last week saying that 77 schools in the Amerindian communities do not have flush toilets, they have latrines. And today another report came out. He says that 90% of the students in Region 9 are failing their math exams.
But sir, you think Nigerian passes maths exam? If Nigerian does know the majority of 65 is 33, how can he talk about maths?
Anyway, Ms. Fernandez, what do you think of these numbers? Ms. Fernandez?
Shibaki,
For the Indigenous community, I do Those numbers, from my experience of going into those parts, I think it could be around that. Because like some of the areas where you have the schools, it's so far out, and the reality once again with resources and so forth, I haven't been for a while, but however, from when I would go, I know that you had many times one person teaching 2 or 3 grades, and the reality is, especially in the riverine areas, the other thing is by the time those children reach the school, many of them are tired. When the one teacher now has to make accommodation within that small classroom to try to teach different grades and different persons, and at the same time prepare some of them for CXE, common entrance, and so forth, it's difficult. In addition, many of them don't have that help at home, like how Ms. Ramjit would have mentioned earlier about family and the importance of teaching. Many of the families, they're trying to make ends meet. So to say they even have that opportunity to sit down, then think of it. Those of us who would have had a certain level of education, we would have had degrees or so forth. Many of them, their parents don't have it. And the math that they do now, it's not the math that we did or the way we learned the tables or anything. It's a totally different math. Even for me who went to school with math, when you see the math, the way they're finding out 2 times 3 is equal 6, it's very difficult. They have to multiply, then add this column and all of that. So for the parents there, many of them, they know 2 by 3 is equal 6, but if the children bring that whole formula that they're doing it, they can't assist them. When we would have mentioned earlier about other schools like Queens, Bishops, and Saints, let's also remember this point that many times the schools are still thriving apart from resources with the old Students Association. We always give back. That's one. In addition to that, you have we try to do a lot of mentorship and so forth. But remember one thing, most of the lessons are packed by the same students from those 3 schools. So as much as, yes, they put the resources, many students from those schools still need help and would end up in the lessons, the private lessons after school. So the school of itself is not holistic in giving them all that they need to say that they don't need extra lessons. And I say that to show that for education levels and areas that are furrowed, that don't have the resources and so forth, more likely those numbers would be accurate because they don't have the resources, the teachers may not be enough. And then in addition, a lot of times when there's new training in the math or so forth, they may have just a few representatives from the school, but not necessarily all the teachers who are teaching that math would be at that workshop. And that's how we are at a disadvantage, and the numbers are what it says they are.
Good. This question came from one of our viewers, and again, I'm asking these viewers, please bear with me. I got about 55 questions. I cannot put through all of them. The show is only an hour and a half. Now, they ask this question, and this for all of you, but be brief, please, because we're running out of time right now. Should transportation be free for all students in Guyana?
Yes.
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 Unreservedly.
No
Yeah.
question.
We have the money to
And
buy
the
buses
teachers.
and we can pay the drivers.
Yes.
I want to
We
say
have to buy buses non-stop.
I want to say also that I mean we can go through I mean I've seen Burkina Faso, they have a very good model they've used. They went to the Chinese and they buy these new buses. They're very low maintenance and low cost, and they were able to get at least 300 or 400 around the country to help the people, and it's free too. I think the bigger discussion is we can have free transportation across the whole country to solve some of the problems that we're having. Because now you're constructed to a minibus, and as Leland said, folks who buy their license and have your life in their hands, why don't we take that away and be able to put it into the hands of responsibility? But oh, shoot, I might be mistaken because some of the government officials actually own some of these private buses. So you see what the problem is.
Okay. Now, another question I got from one of our listeners here. Should children be given, this is a tough one, free school bags?
Why is that tough?
Pardon me?
Why is it tough?
School bags? Well, first of all, sir, a school bag is to carry food and books to school. If you're going to school and you have no teacher, what's the use you have books? And if your parents cannot afford you a proper meal, then your school bag is going to be empty. So 2 things here. 1, all school books should be free. Like in New York here, like in America, most school books up to secondary level are free. Free school books. You have to sign for the book, and if you damage it, you pay for it. Secondly, most schools provide at least one free meal per kid. And that should happen in Guyana because Guyana has a lot of money to give each child a free meal and free uniform too. People don't understand the amount of money we get from that country, but most of this money is going towards contract because that's where the real theft take place. When you give a contract, the loopholes are tremendously open wide for you to get a filter along amount of money that goes to the subcontractors and the officials who hand this contract out. Can you imagine a man who could barely spell his name that goes by the name of Guyana Critic got a contract for $900 million to build a pump? The guy can't even turn a screwdriver. That's one of the examples of widespread corruption in that country. And recently, the head of the GPC, the new GPC, Mr. Ramrupa, received a $40 billion contract to supply drugs to the hospitals in the country.
40 contracts you see for $7 billion.
Sorry, thank you for the correction. 40 contract for $7 billion. Yeah. I mean, the amount of money is stupendous in that country. And you know what's so comical in that country? The world market price for sugar is 15 cents per pound, but we are hell-bent on producing sugar at 40 cents per pound because, first of all, government should never be involved in any business. Government should facilitate business and get revenue from taxation and royalties. So government should get out of business. Government should never own Gaisuko, and government should never tell people to go back and cut cane. There is no crop in this world, or no program in this world, no industry in this world that has been associated with bloodshed like sugar. Sugar has caused millions of lives to be lost, bloodshed, strife, mayhem, you name it. Sugar has caused a lot of problems in this world to Black people and Indian people. Why is this government hell-bent on telling people go back to cut cane? Do you see Black leaders in America telling Black people go back to sharecropping and plant cotton? That's a retrograde step that this government is going to get into. But
there's some recent information I just want to bring you up to date. Because of drought in Brazil and in the East Asian countries that produce sugar price on the world market has increased, I think was last week's stats, from 19 cents to 28 cents. And it's on an upward swing because most of these countries produce sugarcane cannot because they're having droughts. So that might be good for the government of Guyana.
Yeah, the government should not own Gaisuko. Gaisuko should be privatized, given to people who run each estate. It shouldn't be a total of Gaisuko. It should be Rosal Estate, Albion Estate, Lenore Estate, Sugar Estate, whatever, and let them provide royalties and taxes to the government. But here's the kickback. Here is the upside of running Gaisuko. Gaisuko represents about 8 to 10 parliamentary seats based on the type of people who work in Gaisuko and the political party that they support. So the people will not let go of Gaisuko. So that's a process that is very, very hard. It's like the conundrum. Should we go ahead and subsidize an entity that has been failing for the past 10 years? Gaisuko receives about $6 to $8 billion annually for producing nothing.
But Gaisuko support communities though. In any way, let me just do this commercial.
Technology, and we should retrain these cane cutters in technology, because when you look at the 5 greatest companies in the world, like Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, they're all technology company. Why is Guyana so steep in being a third world backward rice republic? We need to do better than that, and we need better leadership.
We'll get there sometime in the future, Leland. I want to say once again, for all of you shoppers, all from one supplier, go to allfromonesupplier.com. One is a number. And you can get all your curries, your roti, your fish, your meat, your pastries online. You can use your EBT cards, your credit cards, or your debit cards, and it will be delivered directly to your home. For more information, you can call 718-551-3292. 718-551-3292. Allfromonesupplier.com. That's the website. Thank you. Now, my next question is this, and it goes to all of you. In Guyana, there's a lot of construction going on, which is good for the country because the country has some ancient infrastructure.
Correct.
But this person is telling me, and this is a viewer, whilst building new infrastructure is good for the country, roads and bridges and so forth, we cannot eat that.
Correct.
That's right, sir.
Ms. Lorraine, what do you have to say on that? Ms. Ramjit?
I think that's a double-edged sword question. You need infrastructure to move the economy.
No, the
And you have
person said they need infrastructure, but it said we cannot eat that alone.
It's true.
One of the things is that we didn't touch upon it in terms of labor supply in Guyana. There's an abundance of job opportunities in Guyana, and this is not a favorable conversation that people like to hear. If you do not want to work, how are you going to eat? There are enough private sector jobs, and ask the question, why is it that the Chinese and certain private sector have to import labor to do the job in Guyana? A lot of people do not like to work. And again, it goes to mental illness, it goes to resources, it goes to accessibility to the job in terms of getting there. So the other thing is that, Leland said it, the alcoholism is prevalent in Guyana. Mental abuse is prevalent in Guyana. The victimization is prevalent in Guyana. And these are something, doesn't matter if you have $1 billion, unless the mindset is changed, people need to understand that yes, the trickle-down effect, you cannot depend on all of it to be done by government. Policies are there. They are the 1%er who are going to use the system. It's going to benefit them. At the end of the day, 90% of the population is going to be impoverished. So what do you do about it? Do we complain about it every day? Do we say the government is not doing their job? The previous government is not doing the job? So forth and so on. At the end of the day, we need to take action. And the action is that it starts with trying to get out of your economic situation. So it's a microeconomic situation. You cannot wait for the government to pull you out. Yes, the infrastructure and the roads and all of these things need to be done. The land we talk about, oh, it's not available. We talk about going back into agriculture. Most of the Americans here, and I'm comparing the two, they rely on organic product. Clearly, people will drive substantial amount of time to get Guyanese produce. Why? Ask yourself that. Why are Guyanese in the diaspora will go and get it? And I'm talking from Brooklyn to Queens, to Long Island to Schenectady, from Minnesota to Florida. They will go the extra mile and they will pay the prices. Why? Because there's a nationalistic pride in Guyana. And as much as we're talking about being pessimistic, I see that there is a turn. It will take time for an economic growth. There is a plague in terms of corruption across the board. We see that in other countries that have resource curse, as they call it. We saw that all across the board. This is not new to Guyana. And it's not new to this government, and it's not new to the old government. And policies are in place. But at the end of the day, people need to understand that do something about it. Don't just complain about it.
Okay. Now, I have one question. I can't go because we run out of time. I have one question from our listener, which is good. And after that, you all will give me your closing remarks. Now, this listener is saying, we are saying people don't want to work in Guyana, and people are drinking alcohol, and it's a she. But she's telling me that you got to blame the people in the diaspora who send tons of money, give these people to stay home and not work. Yes. Now, quickly, you all got 1 minute to respond to this, each one of you.
I agree. I totally agree. There was a time where foreign needs from the family members were there because they had a better resources, sending the money. But there's a dependency complex. There is this dependency on the US base, send the barrel over. And not just anything, they want name brand, they want this, they want the equivalent of why we talk about obesity. You have vegetable growing in your garden, but yet you want the stuff in the can, which again, red dyes, blue dyes, things that are impactful to Guyanese community. They do not have the resources for diabetic clinic and so forth. So you know what? Send the American-based sugar-laced stuff that the Americans themselves do not want, that they will go and buy the raw Guyana sugar.
Okay.
So yes, there is a dependency that needs to stop.
Colin, you want to weigh in on that? Why do we encourage dependency in Guyana by sending money given to these people? That's what the listener is asking.
Well, as Ms. Ramjit said rightfully, so it was needed back then. I mean, in 2005, remittances account for 25%. If you remove that, we would be very impoverished. We would be totally impoverished. But now it's more like 3%, right? We're still giving $560 or $550 million a year. And I think that the problem that I'm seeing, and to rebut Ms. Ramjit's point, isn't that people aren't lazy in Guyana. I don't see that, right? I traveled the length and breadth of Guyana. I think people need opportunity. Can I walk in like everybody else and put in my application as a contractor and get funding to build a road or anything? No, it doesn't happen. The infrastructure is not in place. Do I want to be an agriculture? I want to be a farmer? I can't be a farmer because the aid for farming goes to certain communities, particularly if you live in Region 3 and Region 6 and Region 2.
Okay.
So there is massive inequities, and that's being created by government.
Yes.
I'm not defending Ms. Ramjit, but you know, some people in Ghana just don't want to work, and that's a fact. They
But
just
not
don't want to
everybody.
work.
I don't think that's something.
No, it's not. I don't think it's everybody, but some
I
of
think
them
people
just
want
don't
to work, but I think people need help. There's a system that continues to keep on them, keeping them impoverished. That is lacking them, keeping them away from opportunities. I don't think that that's the case.
Leland, why are
Let
we
me just qualify that by no means am I saying that people are lazy. I think sometimes anxiety, financial security, food insecurity, that all leads to, again, if you're beaten down over and over and over again, you give up. And there needs to be, and I don't know what that remedy is in terms of getting people to, get to where equity is. And that's where the problem is. It's not fairness. People are like, well, it's not fair. No, it's equity. There's no equity. You say it correctly, Mr. Haynes, that they don't have the opportunity to get there. Right. And that's where the bridge is that how do you springboard from where you're at to going into that office? And that's across all social programs that needs to rehaul. And again, I do not have an answer to that. I don't sit in Parliament.
Okay, Leland, quickly, you have 30 seconds. Why do you send 2-3 borrowers home every year?
Well, for all the listeners, I'll say this, man. I think Guyanese complain too much about too many things, and they're always trying to blame somebody, especially the government. Some of the complaints have merit, and some are totally baseless. But I can't find any logic in Guyanese people saying that the cost of living is very high, and whole day they're on their phone, on Facebook, and WhatsApp, and the garden, and the backyard full of bush. Simple as that. And next point I want to make is Guyana has outlived its roads design and construction quality as well as the water supply. Guyana is facing serious problems in terms of its water supply. The same system that supplies water since 200 years when the British was there is the same system that applies. And we need to straighten that out because that's a part of infrastructure. Another aspect of infrastructure that is totally dangerous is the construction design of houses. Guyana has a high water table, and if you're going to build multi-story properties, you need a proper foundation. We don't have that, and that's why you find a lot of sagging and crinking and slipping of houses. To end this discussion, I will say this, right? People in Guyana need to understand that you have to motivate yourself to succeed in life. Nobody can ever do that for you. And no government can ever succeed unless the people support them. And Guyanese have been tolerant of too much corruption from all governments, past and present. Unless the changes, Guyanese will never succeed. Yes. And by the way, I hope Amazon Wars win the competition.
Ms. Fernandez, do you want to do this?
Okay, basically, for Guyana, I understand what everyone has been saying. However, we have to remember that for people to really function, there must be an affordable livelihood. Because right now, with even what people who are working, who are not lazy or anything, what they're making, it's not even affordable to live off of that income. So many times those barrels help them to feed their children. That's one thing. Even though I understand what you're saying, and yes, we need more of a diversified economy within Guyana. We have tech, we have agriculture. Look at what's going on right now with the UN Summit of the Future and all these other avenues. So with what Guyana is doing, because the reality is we're talking when we have workers who come in from other countries, we have to remember that they're important because one, human capital is basically the center of everything. And for Guyana to be successful in that rate, we have to put education in the mix because many times the way we are teaching our children, it's like you can't teach a fish to climb a tree. And then judge them on that. So we need to be diversified in our skills and up to par with the rest of the international world. So others don't have to come and take jobs that we can do, and we're just the basic laborers instead of those with proper technical skills that can take over and do it. So basically, we just need to have a reformation of our mentality and to modernize it. And the classes system that we have in certain cases, we need to also work on having an elimination of that.
We have gone over our time. Quickly, Ms. Ramjit, your closing remarks. You have 15 seconds.
Well, we covered a lot of issues today, and I must say that as much as there is this, there's a lot of changes that need to be made in terms of policy change and people's mindset in terms of who matters. And at the end of the day, the Guyanese people that matters. And as you don't want them that 800,000 people to leave at that point, and what's going to be left with that beautiful country of ours. And I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that there are going to be changes, and with the resources that are in place, as much as it's not getting where it needs to get, in 10 to 20 years, I do hope that Guyana becomes a forefront in terms of all the actions that are taking. And as a side note, I hope it does not become a U.S. economy in terms of what the perils that we have.
Leland, your closing remarks. 15 seconds.
All my Guyanese brothers and sisters, I say this. Guyana has 800,000 people for the past 50 years. More Guyanese live overseas than in Guyana. So the contribution Guyanese overseas can make, what we refer to as diaspora, is tremendously great. However, the contribution can only be accepted if you want to receive it. And Guyanese need to hold their leaders accountable for every single act in expenditure, in processing, and in public service appointment. Because at the end of the day, the greatest resource of any country is not its gold and bauxite and oil, it's its people.
True. Ms. Fernandez, your closing remarks. Again, 15 seconds.
Okay. Well, for Guyana, I would say that we see the future and what it's to come and what we need to do. So I would advise persons to let us diversify the way that we do things within our economy and also focus on educational activities, especially for our children who are going into various fields, on fields that we see in the future can yield economic returns and be able to help us within our futures. We need to look and see that AI is one thing that is coming up and going to more careers like STEM and so forth.
Colin?
I think clearly the future of Guyana is dependent on the people. I think that, when the chips are against us, I think we have to sit down and think of what's important for us. I think that this coming election is going to be a very consequential, probably the most consequential in nation history. And I think the Guyanese people really need to sit down and look at the bread and butter issues. Is their education system good? Is your healthcare system thriving? I mean, do you have food on the table? Can you survive? Can you live? And I think that also the discussions we've been talking, we need to understand that, yes, government needs to do, but also personal responsibility, civic engagement, and advocacy. You don't just vote and that's the end of it. I think we have to look at voting as the beginning of the advocacy to get what we need.
Good. I want to tell all our listeners in North America and around the world that fall began yesterday. So we are in fall as we speak. And also, I want to let all our listeners know that President Ali is in New York. And on Wednesday, he'll be addressing the United Nations General Assembly. And also tomorrow evening, he has a meeting at the Hibiscus Restaurant on Jamaica Avenue from 7 to 9 p.m. And on Wednesday, he has one in Brooklyn, New York. Just let me get that address for you all quickly.
No, I think it's the Waterfalls Lounge.
The one in Brooklyn, New York will be held at the, yeah, Colin, you're right, the Waterfalls Lounge on Church Avenue in Brooklyn. So if you can attend, please do so. Now, I want to thank Noir Singh for making this program available. I want to thank Devin Bissoon and Ryan Gobin, our technical directors, and all our listeners. A special thanks to you for listening, for tuning in, and to our sponsors. Thanks to you as well for sponsoring or making this program available. Without your help, we will not be on the air every Monday night. Thanks again to all of you. And I want to just plug my book, as you all can see. It's called A Race to the Finish Line, The Election of Barack Hussein Obama as the first Black President of the United States. And it's on sale at Amazon and all the major bookstores. It's paperback. It costs just $40 US. So get it now, because from mid-November, it will be going into hard copy, and that will be sold for over $200 US. So it's best to get a copy of it now and to make sure that you beat the hardcover drive, because as soon as the hardcover comes out, the paperback will be gone. So make sure you get a copy of it as we speak. Now, it's a comprehensive textbook, and I was told by the Vice Chancellor of the University of West Indies that I'm the first Guyanese Caribbean scholar to write a comprehensive textbook on the US presidency. So I take that with a lot of pride in me. But thanks to all our listeners, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. Once again, to you, Ms. Ramjit, thanks for all your input. Ms. Fernandez, thank you too. Colin Haynes, thank you very much. And Mr. Leland Rupnarayan. We'll have to redo this program sometime, maybe early next year again, to see what changed and what does not change. So I hope to make sure I contact all of you once more. Thanks a lot.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Doc.
Thank you.
Congrats, Book.
Good night.
Good night.